Okay, I'd like to introduce Jim now. Jim is the founder, former CEO of Product Plan. I'm going to let Jim explain what Product Plan is. He's had lots of customer development and product customer-facing roles with companies that you may know in town, software companies, Appfolio, Citrix, a little place called Microsoft, in the Pacific Northwest. And he's been linked to our program now for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years.
A handful, yeah.
Yeah. Jim is a natural teacher. He knows this stuff, I want to say, better than anybody in his community. He's really the right person to do this. And this whole, you're going to find this whole example of Product Plan really fitting because of how he applied these concepts developing. So with that, Jim, I expect we'll talk a little bit more about your background, right?
Yeah.
Come on up, and I'm going to go to your slide deck. Thank you. That wasn't any better than any talk I ever do.
It's great to see everyone here, and I'm starting to recognize faces, so that's really, really great. And I'm starting to remember the businesses that you're working on, the ventures that you're working on. So this is all coming together.
That's for you.
Thank you. And tonight I'm going to talk about business models. It does, as Dave said, dovetail quite a bit with what I talked about before the break, which is market validation. So David Talene-Lawton and I talked about concepts of market validation, why to do it, how to do it, some of the best practices around it. How many of you were in that market validation session before the break? Okay, so a good number of you. So for those of you who weren't in it, I'll be sure and cover some of those concepts again. But if you feel like I'm not going quite deep enough, or you have some specific questions around what questions to ask customers or how to go about finding customers to interview, that sort of thing, I'm happy to cover all of that. And as we go through this, please ask questions.
Yeah, let's make this do the size of the group. Let's make this interactive. So we've got questions
I would love
along
that.
the way. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. And as a side note, last week I was in Costa Rica. I worked on this presentation in Costa Rica, and so your guess is as good as mine as to what we're going to find here. So I have about 20 to 25 years of product management, market development, new product development experience. Before I got into product management, I was a technology book author for Microsoft. But I've been in the tech world now for probably 3 decades. And so I have a lot of experience with launching products, seeing products both really take off into the stratosphere, as well as those who have completely tanked and have lost tens of millions of dollars. And I had, during the last session, I had a good case study around how we lost $10 million without doing market validation. But my specialties are around customer discovery, how to interview customers, how to get to the truth of what they're saying, because often customers will tell you one thing, and it's up to us to figure out what their real intent is. And that's part of the skill set. But I've been fortunate enough to be part of companies that have really knocked it out of the park, that even today are generating billions of dollars of revenue. And so this process that I'm talking about, including the business model canvas and market validation, are proven to develop companies that really hit a home run. There we go. So we're going to talk about a little bit of a case study around my company and how we started it. We're going to talk about what is a business model? How do you define that? Then we're going to talk about the business model canvas and 3 specific areas of the business model canvas. So value proposition, customer segments, and revenue streams. There are a total of 9 different categories on the business model canvas, but we really want you to focus on these 3 right now, because in our opinion, these are the places to start, and they're the most important. These are the areas that you're going to get the most questions on from judges and mentors during the program and the competition. So Product Plan is a product management software platform, and that's my company. We started it about 10 years ago. my co-founder Greg Goodman and I got together and we said, let's start a company. And I had a whole slew of ideas. He had a slew of ideas. And we said, how do we make sense of all of these different ideas? And we had reached a certain point in our life where we didn't have to necessarily seek funding. So one of the values that we had is that we wanted to start a company that we could bootstrap, which means that we self-fund the company. And we started looking for ideas, both business ideas and consumer ideas that fit the model of bootstrapping. And then we also had other ideas that were really important to us. So some of our values were things like we didn't want to have a company that had venture funding, which meant that we had board members deciding what we did. We really wanted to have complete autonomy. We wanted to be able to have the freedom to create our own culture. That was very important to us. And Greg and I operate a certain way. We actually got our start by paddleboarding almost every morning. So every morning we would go out paddleboarding and we would talk about the different ideas. And we thought, this is the kind of culture that we want to create. We don't want people sitting in offices being siloed in their cubicles, slaving away. We want to have this collaborative, work-life balance, outdoorsy lifestyle. And so as a result, we built a company around that. We even located our headquarters down by the waterfront in the Funk Zone. And it was because of those reasons, because we wanted to have a certain value. So any idea that we came up with, and this is actually a picture of our whiteboard at the time with all of our ideas, any idea that we came up with had to kind of conform to these ideas and these constraints that we had for the business.
Was that a blank board at the beginning?
That was a blank board, and it had many.
You knew you wanted to do something. You knew you wanted to do it.
Yes.
With your partner.
Yes.
And
I came to the table with a notebook, a thick notebook full of ideas.
Okay.
And I started vetting those ideas in front of people. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And some of those ideas wound up on the board, and others we said, yeah, that's not a good idea. And as a note to you all, ideas really are a dime a dozen. So a lot of us, as we develop our business ideas, we're very concerned about the intellectual property of those. We're very concerned about other people stealing our ideas. And in some cases, it's warranted. In some cases, you might have patents that are at stake. In some cases, you developed some proprietary technology in the lab. And maybe in those cases, it's probably good to keep those ideas close to the vest. But in most cases, the way that you're going to get validation is by broadcasting it far and wide with advisors and potential customers. And so, yes. So we took a growth equity round a couple of years ago, and the company that invested heavily in the company moved a lot of the operations to Denver. So we do have several employees left in Santa Barbara, but Denver's now the official headquarters. Yeah, so it's a little bit sad to see all of that change.
How did the culture change when you decided to take that?
Oh, that's a great question. So we had our cultural ideas from the very beginning, and primarily it was hustle, heart, and humility. Those were our concepts. And when somebody makes an investment, a lot of times they see that a company is doing well and they don't really want to rock the boat. And so they kept a lot of the culture. They kept things like the kegerator in the office. They kept things like, those lunches on Wednesdays. We often had sushi lunches. That was part of the culture. Is when somebody joins the company, we give everybody chopsticks because we have sushi lunches once a week. And that was part of it. And so the company came in that bought us, and they kept all of those things intact, but the heart wasn't behind it. It was more of a thing that they kept doing, not because it was the right thing to do. It was because it was just part of the culture. So there was a shift that happened, and again, a little bit sad in the nature of the beast. As as a company grows, they always evolve. Yeah.
Did anybody move to Denver?
Yeah. Yeah, we had several employees move to Denver. Yeah, we had some employees who were already in Denver. We had a fairly distributed workforce, especially during COVID. We had a couple of people that moved to Denver and other places. People moved to Texas and so on. Yeah, bless you. And we, and so after the acquisition, a lot of people moved to Denver. Yeah. So great questions. So we used at the very beginning the business model canvas. So I printed out multiple pages, stitched them together with tape, and we used Post-it notes to start to document our rough ideas around who's our customer, how much are we going to charge them, how are we going to charge them, is this going to be a live person that picks up the phone and answers their questions, or is it going to be online help only? You know, these are some of the things that you'll need to decide for your own business as you go through it. And I'll run through what each of these things mean. But the point I want to make with the canvas is that once you start writing on the canvas, it's never final. And if it is final, if you get to the point where the canvas isn't changing, you're probably not learning. You're probably not asking the right questions. So to have a living canvas that is continually updating, or potentially multiple canvases. So that's also an option for you, especially if you have teammates. Maybe someone on the team feels very strongly about a certain market entry strategy and a certain type of product, and other people on the team feel differently. There's nothing wrong with you having two different canvases. And then through validation, you can begin to figure out, okay, where are the commonalities and where are the areas that we need to make decisions on, and how do we get to the point of merging those? So, okay. So then we conducted interviews as part of our market validation. So we conducted about 10 what I call discovery interviews. And these are interviews that are focused not really around pitching the product. These are interviews focused on asking our customer base, which were product managers, often in technology companies, tell us about your day. What do you do during the day? How do you spend your time? How do you know if you had a good year? What are some of the frustrations along the way? And then once we started to get a feel for what their frustrations were, we could then begin to pitch them an idea that could potentially solve their frustration. The funny thing was, when we first started those discovery interviews, I had a slightly different idea from what we actually wound up building. So my idea was to create a platform for these product managers to capture their customer interviews and to be able to make decisions around the information that they were getting from customers. I thought that'd be pretty good because that's what I was doing day in and day out. I've conducted thousands of interviews with potential customers, and the tracking of that information, especially after if you're interviewing customers for a product, and you will soon discover this. By the 10th interview, you've forgotten what the second and third one have talked about. So the taking of notes is a very important thing, and being able to glean the most important information out of those notes is also very important. So I thought, we'll come up with software for that. So I started talking with product managers around that problem, and the first couple said, that's an interesting problem, and I have that, but my bigger problem is around creating a product roadmap. And for those of you that don't know what a product roadmap is, it's basically a document, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be a PowerPoint presentation, it could be a Word document, something that outlines what the company is going to be doing over the next few months as they develop their product. And they had frustrations around their product roadmap. So we said, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so, well, what if we helped you with that problem that you have? And their eyes would light up and they would say, that sounds great. So we would dive into that. We conducted 30 interviews around that and actually launched a landing page that pointed to and described a product that didn't yet exist. So we drove traffic, we built a web page, took only a couple of hours, and then drove traffic to it through Google and through LinkedIn. And people started signing up for a free preview of this product that we hadn't started building yet. And that was a really great indication to us, really great validation that one, the messaging that we were using, the way that we were talking about the problem resonated with people, and that two, people were looking to solve that problem. And through that, through those interviews, through the landing page experiment that we did, we could get an idea of how many people we could attract to the product. We got an idea of how many people were looking to solve that problem, because people were typing into Google certain keywords and coming up with ads to our website. So we had an idea of how many people we could attract to the offering. And then by the time we actually launched the product, we had conducted 70 interviews. And every single interview taught us something. Now, it doesn't mean that every interview we asked the same questions, because the interview questions that we asked at the very, very beginning were quite a bit different and probably pretty dumb sounding compared to the ones that we were conducting, 20 or 30 or 40 in. Because by then we were fairly sophisticated, we knew the market really well, and we were able to start asking questions around pricing, starting to ask questions around the purchase process, around their budgeting, things like that, around authority to buy, and really important questions around the sales cycle. So does that make sense, that interviewing process? Yes. Well, in the very beginning, we started with friendlies. So I was in product management, and so I had a lot of product management colleagues that I would speak to, and I said, "We're thinking about building something. Would you talk with us?" So, but then after every one of those calls, I would ask, "Is there somebody else that we should talk to? Is there someone else that you think might benefit from something like this?" And so that led to other interviews. And then by the time we got to the landing page experiment, people were entering their email into our form on the website, and I was emailing them saying, "We're building this product, and we think that we would love to have your input to make this product the best product for you." And people are like, "Yeah, I want to help with that," because the problem that we were talking about solving was a big enough problem to them that they were willing to talk with us. So that's how we found them.
Trick to remember.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that we did was I went onto Reddit. I did a post on LinkedIn. I did things like that to get other people to talk. But the most beneficial way of getting people to talk is to be authentic, have a good conversation, make it a partnership as you're talking with them. So it's not like, "I want something from you." Make it a partnership. We're going to work on this together. And then at the end of the conversation, say, do you have any other product management friends that you think might be able to help us, or that you think might benefit from the solution? So that's probably the number one way to get additional interviews. Yeah. Yes. I missed the first part of your question. I'm sorry. Yes. So the things that we get from the interview modify what we're going to build. Yes. So we had several different versions of a presentation that we gave to people. So the very first presentation was all about the problem. And we told them what we thought their problem was. We said, "Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Product Manager, we think you have these 5 problems with product roadmaps." And then we would get them to agree to that. And if you've conducted enough interviews, hopefully you could do the same thing. You know your customers well enough that most of the things you're telling them, they're going to agree to. And then the next version of the presentation was more of a product pitch. So we would say to them, we already know you have these problems. And the way that we think we're going to solve that problem for you is a product that does these 5 things. And then the other thing that we would add to it, and this is really important, is we said the product will not do these things. And we were explicit about what we thought our product would not do, especially for our minimum viable product, right? The product that we would go to market with was going to be a very small, thinned down product, not with every feature imaginable, but it was going to be very, very small. And so then they would say, oh, it's not going to have a PDF export. I absolutely have to have a PDF export. And then we would ask them questions about that. So tell me why. Okay, so imagine you have a PDF export, you print it out. What do you do with that? Where do you take it to? Do you attach it to an email? Do you print it out? Do you give it to someone? And so we would walk them through the process to really understand what they would do with that PDF until we got to the point where we said, I think we have to have PDF as part of our MVP. So then the next version of our presentation on the list of things we were going to include was PDF export. And so every 3 or so interviews, our presentation was revising. It was not this static thing. And that's one thing I'd like to make sure everybody understands is that this market validation process is not the same thing as a scientific study. It's not the same thing as doing a survey where you ask the same questions from the first person all the way through the 100th person. Your questions should be evolving. And if you've heard an answer to something a number of times, and it's like you've heard the same thing 4 or 5 times, you don't need to ask that question anymore. You can move on to other more important things as your learning evolves. So did that answer your question about evolving? Okay, good.
Then who's the picture out on the top?
Yeah, he's a customer. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but yeah. So, and we would conduct our interviews by Zoom. First by GoToMeeting, which I worked on, then Zoom. Yes. Yeah, yeah. Government's a tricky one, but my focus in market validation, especially if I have an idea of what it is that I want to build, it really becomes more of a sales call. So I'm more interested in learning who's the buyer, when is their budgeting done. I'm interested in knowing what other products have they bought in the last year that were kind of similar to mine, and how long did that process take? I want to know what are the systems I need to be in order to become a vendor of the government. I want to know who has to sign off on it. When do they need to sign off on it? Do I need to get the ball rolling 2 years in advance? So if you have a contact like that, they might be able to help you answer those questions, or at least point you in the right direction. It doesn't sound like they're the actual buyer, but they're probably very helpful anyway. But ultimately, you want to spend most of your time talking with the buyers of the product. Yeah. Sometimes it's useful to talk with the users of the product. So imagine that you're, when I was working on Appfolio, which is property management software, the users of the product often were the property managers, the people who manage the apartments that you're renting. But they're not the buyers. They might be an influencer, but they're not the actual buyer. So we found out that the buyer is the president of the company. And it turns out that the president of the company doesn't often care too much if their property managers are happy, right? So if the property managers are blown away by our software, and we make the most amazing software for property managers, this sounds a little jaded, I know, but it's true. Certainly we want to create good software and software that takes, that saves time and gives people delight and all of that. But at the end of the day, that doesn't matter as much as the benefits that the owner of the company gets, the president of the company, because that person is the one who signs the checks. So I want to be talking mostly with that person. Yes, Esther?
The other thing that you can discover is there might also be gatekeepers. They might not be the decision makers, but they might be the ones that can fix your opportunity because they didn't pass something that needs, whether it's regulation.
Yeah, good point. And in the property management industry, the gatekeepers were often the accountants, right? They were the ones who could put the kibosh on the whole deal. So it's good to understand the different players in an environment who are involved in making a decision, especially if your product is business to business. This may not come in as much into play for consumer products, but in the business world, definitely there are a lot of different players and dynamics happening. So let's talk about business models and what that means. So a business model is how your venture creates, delivers, and captures value. So what that means is how it creates value, is how it's what its product does. And then how it delivers the value is how you sell it and service it. And then how you capture value is how you monetize that product. So that's the way that I think about business models.
Creates as value as maybe some problem solving there.
Oh yes. So it identifies a problem and it solves a problem for a customer. And for those of you who have read Steve Blank or heard of Steve Blank, his line is that a startup is a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. So, and that's what you're after. You're after creating a business model that is repeatable, right? You might be able to sell to 1 or 2 customers, but can you sell to 1,000 or 100,000? And is scalable, meaning that as it grows, will it be able to self-sustain? So the business model is very much a part of your product market fit. And here for the program, for the new venture program, the business model can be an early indication of product market fit. The market validation interviews that you do can be an early indication of product market fit. So product market fit means that your product solves a problem for a customer segment. And by this, I mean a very specific customer segment. And the revenue model is repeatable. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. And we'll dive into that in a little bit. So people sometimes ask me, so what's a good business model? How do I know if it's a good business model? And that one is really hard to pinpoint because a business model can be for so many different products, so many different types of businesses. But here are some examples. So maybe there is a very defined customer segment. I personally like to develop business models for a very defined customer segment. If someone's coming to me asking for business advice and they say to me, my product is for everyone, I'm skeptical. The more specific we can be, especially at the beginning with our customer segment, the more narrow we can be, the better. And I'll go into some examples of what customer segments are and how we can be very precise about that. A clear value proposition. A value proposition, in a nutshell, is that I can solve a problem very well for this specific customer segment. So that's a good indication of a good business model. Maybe my business model is differentiated. I somehow have some kind of a competitive advantage when you compare it with other products in the market. Maybe there are some high margins. So maybe I make really high revenue, but my costs are fairly low, especially as I reach scale. That's an example of a good business model. Maybe I have customers that stay with me and maybe do repeat purchases. Maybe they refer me to other people. That could be an indication of a good business model. Maybe my acquisition costs are super low. Maybe it doesn't cost me a lot in Google AdWords in order to acquire customers. So those are just some examples. Have all of you seen the business model canvas? All of you have at this point? Okay. So I'm going to cover each one of these segments.
The other way. Has anybody not seen it? You could admit it.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, cool.
So real quickly, in the resources tab on Canvas, there's a whole bunch of resources, including the template for the canvas and a populatable template on Canvas. So make sure you get your heads into that. Yeah, it's kind of blinking out.
Okay. So many benefits of the business model canvas. I mean, obviously you're going to need it for the competition. It's a requirement for the competition. But I think the best benefit to the business model canvas is that it helps you align your team. You can be sitting around with your team, sitting at the coffee shop, saying, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Well, you could be talking about different things. And the business model canvas helps you refine that. It helps you, once you put it into words, you can then have a discussion around the meaning of those words. So it helps you align your team. It helps you refine your pitch, the pitch that you will eventually give at the competition. The way I think about it is that it doesn't really matter at this stage what your business model canvas says. Just write something down. Anything down. Write it down. Because the business model canvas it's a hypothesis. And so think about it like a test, right? So I think my customer is going to be women between the ages of 18 and 25. Great. Write that down. Because if you start interviewing women ages between 18 and 25, you may discover, oh, that's not exactly what I thought. Maybe I need to increase my range a little bit, or maybe I need to move to a different market. But it's a place for you to start testing. If your canvas is not changing, you're not learning. And so I would hope that as time goes on, you're having discussions with your team, maybe even some arguments, and you are adjusting that thing. Okay? And it's okay to not get it right. You may not need to land on one single idea. You might be able to say, okay, you know what? We're going to put a sticky note here for Bob and a sticky note here for John, and then we're going to figure those things out later. And that's okay. So the other thing you can do is vote. So you can come up with a couple of different canvases and then vote as a team. Doesn't mean that anyone's wrong, because at this point, actually what you're trying to do is figure out what's wrong. You're actually trying to fail at this stage. And this is what a lot of startups don't do well, is that they don't go through this advanced work. And they get an idea, they get excited, they start to code or build whatever they're going to be building, and then they launch, and then it turns out to be wrong, and then they've wasted a whole bunch of money, maybe some of their friends' money too, and everybody is upset. Well, this process here helps you reduce that. It won't eliminate that risk entirely, but it'll reduce it. All right, so Mark Twain said continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. So that's what I encourage you to do. Get it on paper and then start to learn and do it from there. So the business model canvas, the way I think about it is that it's divided into two different sections. And for the next few weeks, we want you to concentrate primarily on the right side of the business model canvas. So the business model canvas is divided into these customer-oriented things, and the customer-oriented things include the customer segments that you're going to be going after, the customer relationships, the relationships that you have with them, the channels, which is how they find you or how you find them and how you sell to them, the revenue streams, how you make money off of them, and split down the middle is this value proposition side. So the value proposition is how do you deliver value to the customer? And that value can be a lot of different things. It could be a physical product that you sell to them. It could be a website. It could be, of course, any number of things. But that's why that straddles the business side, because there are certain mechanics that need to be in place in order for you to deliver many kinds of value propositions. For example, if you're Netflix, right? Your Netflix, your key partners are your content providers, right? You need to have these partnerships with content providers. And so if I were Netflix doing the business model canvas, I would write down, have contracts with content providers. And then that in turn becomes part of my value proposition because I'm creating great content, great movies and shows, right? But that's on the business side. So for now, and especially during your very first interviews, be thinking entirely about the customer, right? Who are they? Who are your customers? And what kind of relationships are you going to have with them? And how are you going to reach them? And how are you going to make money with them? That sort of thing. So if I want to boil it down even further than that, if you could pick 3 things to focus on over the next few weeks. Number 1 is customer segments. Who are you going to sell to? Number 2, what's the value that you provide to them? What's the pain and the problem that you solve for them? And how do you solve it for them? And then number 3, how do you make money in that scenario? So if you can think of only those 3 things, you're going to be so far ahead. Okay? And many of the questions that you'll be getting from judges and from mentors and others will focus on those 3 things. So pay close attention to those. So for most of this talk, I'm going to be focused on that. So let's start with customer segments. So these are the different groups of people or organizations that you aim to reach and serve. So they could be people or they could be companies. Okay? How many of you are developing something, or you think you might be developing something that's geared primarily towards individual consumers or customers? Okay, cool. And how many of you are developing something you think you might sell to an organization like a company or a nonprofit or government? Okay, so it seems about split 50-50. That's great. Okay, so here are some ways to think about customer segments. And I want you to think about this in terms of the business model canvas. If you're going to list 2 or 3 bullet points on the customer segments part of the business model canvas, you can think about it in these terms. And next week, is it next week, Dave? We have somebody coming in to talk in great detail about customer segments. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here, but you can break them down demographically. You can break them down by age, by income, gender, and so on. You could say, I'm targeting people over 50 with a college degree. Okay, those are called demographics. If you're talking about businesses, you can group them in terms of firmographics. I'm going to talk with marketing executives at companies with over 500 employees. Okay, and notice how specific these are. The beautiful thing about, the beautiful thing about being really specific about your customer segment is that it makes it easier to find people to interview. So can you imagine if I want to talk to, let's say, people over 50. That's a pretty big market. Where do you start with that? So the more specific I become, people over 50 with a college degree, and maybe people over 50 with a college degree who really value organic produce. See how I've added in a lifestyle benefit there? Okay, now I think I know where I can find those people. I probably know what magazines they read. I probably could find Facebook groups that these people belong to, right? So the more specific we get, the easier it is to find these people. If I want to find marketing executives at companies over 500 employees, LinkedIn is a gold mine, right? I can begin to narrow down people. I can begin to narrow down companies. I can narrow it down geographically. So I have geographic on as another here. So I could say, I want to find, marketing people at companies over 500 employees who are in the state of California. Well, I could find those people. So the customer segments are a way of refining who it is that you're targeting. It helps you not only find the people, but it also will help you build a better product. Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. And if I could paraphrase, I think what I just heard is, if there's another product out there that's already targeting a demographic customer segment that I might want to go after, does that mean that I should start to focus on something else? Was that your question, or is that okay, yeah. Yeah, so does it mean that I can still target that existing group but focus on competitive advantages? And the answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. I have a case study that I'll talk about later. When we created online meeting software called GoToMeeting, at the time there were 50 other online meeting products in the market. And it was what other people might call bloody waters, meaning there's like a lot of red in the water. And we said, we know that we can do it better and faster and cheaper. So we focused on those competitive differentiators in a market that was already quite saturated with online meeting software. So absolutely, because somebody else is doing it and somebody else is targeting the same customer segment, means that there probably has been some validation that the market exists and that it's making money, but also it gives you an opportunity, especially if you're a second mover or a third mover, to be able to come in and do it better in some way. So that's a great question. Yes.
Oh, you can do it better,
Yeah, it had partially to do with technology. It also has to do with guts, I guess, just knowing that we could figure out a way to do it. The part of it was that the incumbent software had been around for a number of years, and we looked at the software and we said, "Oh my God, it is so clunky. It's so hard to use." They had added in so many features into it, and we started to poll people of that product to figure out, how many of these features are you using? And we found out one of the primary features that they were touting, that was like the big feature, only 11% of their customer base used it. And so we said, you know what? We don't have to have that initially. So we can eliminate that. We can make our software easy to use. And then as time goes on, and this is true with technology today, technology becomes easier and cheaper to make. It becomes faster and cheaper to make. And so that becomes a competitive advantage over time. So if you look at software that was created 10, 20 years ago, I just know out of the gate that we could do something that's better and we could do it faster. And the performance is better than they could do. So those are some of the reasons why we just knew. Yes. Yeah, definitely there were patents involved. Yes.
One thing that is, you're kind of making an assumption is, but it sometimes gets overlooked is actually analysis is
Mm.
actually,
Yeah.
and some of the things that you rattled off are in your key competitors. You had the benchmark that you find how you
Yes, I totally agree. And I think understanding the competitors, understanding the landscape, and understanding the problems that those products are solving for their customers, and understanding the frustrations that those customers have with the problems. That's really important too. There is a danger, though, of doing competitive analysis and writing up these 50-page reports, is that you wind up getting in this analysis paralysis sort of mode. It's important to do the research, but there's something to be said for just getting a feeling for something and going for it. Yeah, sounds a little bit. Yeah.
I agree, that's super important, but I also agree for this program, we're not going to have the opportunity and the time and the resources to do a deep dive on competition. But as these two have pointed out, if you don't know, I guarantee you somebody in that audience or the finals will know somebody in the space. And if you can't be ahead of them on that answer, say, yes, we are aware of them. Here's what we do different, or here's what we do different. It's a bad conversation. It doesn't have to be. So you do want to be aware of what's out there, if not a deep dive on analysis. Certainly need to know what's happening.
Yeah, good point. Okay, who owns some Lululemon clothing, or
I didn't like the age demographic.
I haven't put anything up there yet.
Yes, you did. Well, you're gonna.
And who's either owns or has been in a Lululemon store before? Okay, so many of you. All right, so this is not my information. This is their information. So does anyone want to guess what the age range is for the target for Lululemon? Anyone want to venture a guess? We're talking about a range, yes? 14 to 28, okay. Anyone else? 40s, okay. Anyone else?
I could pass for 40. I like it.
Okay, so the Lululemon is women and men. I thought it was primarily women, but it turns out it's not. It's maybe a little heavier towards women, but almost split, 15 to 35. So you said you were close, 14 to 28. Yeah, close. All right. As you might imagine, high income or affluent. So they also call it middle to high income earners. Of course.
It's interesting because they're throwing a 15-year-old in there, so their sons and daughters are high.
True. Yes. Yes. As you can imagine, yoga, running, cycling, and training. They also put in other lifestyle things as their target market. I thought this was interesting, that these people are called succeeders and achievers. They actually label them. So this is something that I've seen done in other companies. They actually label their customers. So they're known as succeeders. The other thing I thought was interesting is that the use of other things is an indicator that they might be a customer for Lululemon. They're passionate about travel and leisure. They're tech savvy. They use Fitbits. They use other, like fitness technology and apps, things like that. And so I'm using this as an example that, it doesn't need to be only firmographic. My target is women between ages 18 to 35. No, I want to get inside their head, right? I want to target people who are fitness enthusiasts, because what this does is not only it helps you target, who you're going after, but it helps you find them. Like, can you imagine if I know this about a Lululemon customer? I know what websites they go to, I probably know who they follow on Instagram. I have a really good idea about where they travel to. I know they probably, I don't know, maybe they go to REI as well. I have a pretty good feeling for who they are, and therefore I can target them. All right. And the final thing I'll throw on there is that they're global, but mostly, I think, I can't remember what the percentage is, but it's 90% is in the US.
I have
Yeah.
2 questions. One, where did you get this? 2, for the group, how do you think Lululemon came up with it?
Yeah. On this spreadsheet, there's a link to this reference. Yes. So you can look up, and I can't remember the link to the reference. But they probably got this through a lot of marketing meetings. Yeah.
Customer interaction, right?
Yeah.
They had to validate.
I suspect it was 2 guys that started the company. So they probably got a really good start on this. They probably got a really good start on kind of defining who it was. And maybe they started out primarily with women. Maybe they started out primarily with yoga, but they probably already knew about lifestyle, that sort of thing. And then the marketing teams, as time went on, got more specific and began to label them. Probably a lot of testing. Yes. Yeah, yeah. My approach has always been, it seems to work, is there's a balance of vision and pushing your customers forward beyond where they thought they could be, and satisfying their needs. So there are different rubrics and models that we can use, and it goes beyond the new venture program, but I'll go a little bit into this, that you can use to figure out what to build for customers. And there are a certain number of features that you have to have. They're called must-have features that you have to have in your product just to get into the market. So imagine the property management software, which is an example that I used earlier. You have to have accounting as part of that property management software, or you're not going to be able to compete in the market. Okay, so done. Accounting software, got it. Now, do I want to invest a ton of money and millions of dollars into making the absolute best accounting software? No, probably not. What I instead want to do is find those things that the customers don't even know that they want, and focus on those too. So there are these features that we can add into products, and they go by a lot of different names. One of them could be Purple Cow, and I'll talk about Purple Cow. Another rubric calls it exciter features. So these exciter features are valuable features, but customers don't even know that they want it. For example, in Appfolio, when we were developing the property management software, we had a belief that in the next 5 to 10 years, that people aren't going to be writing checks anymore. Checks are archaic. We saw what was happening in the UK, and in the UK, no one writes checks anymore. And yet here people in the US are still writing checks. And we thought, chances are in the next few years, those are going by the wayside. And our customers kept asking us to integrate with check scanning machines that would scan the checks that come in every month for the rent. And we said no to them. And our customers were angry at us for that, because we refused to build integrations into the check scanning machines. And instead we said, just wait, because we have something better for you. And the thing that was better was online rent payments, right? And I think most of us, maybe many of us, all of us, take advantage of online rent payments now. It's like a commonly accepted thing. But if you imagine 10 years ago, people were still writing checks for it. And so what we did was we created an exciter feature that they didn't know that they wanted that. Everyone was still locked in their paradigm of the old way of doing it, of feeding checks into a machine. And they couldn't leave their desk for the first week of every month because all the rent checks were coming in. And then we introduced online rent payments, and people said to me, we can go on vacation the first week. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And so that became the new way of thinking, and everybody else followed suit with that. And so don't be building a product in search of a market, certainly, but building a product with a belief of where you want to lead your customers. Yes, do that. Does that help? Okay, yeah. Okay, so if you have a minute or two, I would like all of you, for your customer segment that you have in mind, to write down your ideal customer. We call it an archetype. We call it an ICP, ideal customer profile. But just take a minute and write down, I don't know, 3 or 4 bullet points. Who is your ideal customer? And you can base it on, I'll go back to the list of what they could be: demographics, firmographics, etc. Like, who are they? What do they like to do? And just take a minute and do that. Okay, cool. For those of you, it'd be great if you could continue the conversation with your teams the next time you get together. For those of you that don't have your teams here, bring this to your team and have that conversation. And I think you'll find it to be really valuable. But in the interest of time, I'd love to move on. Okay, now we're going to talk about value propositions. And in the session before break, we talked a little bit about it, but this really is, when it comes down to it, your value proposition is the most important thing out of your entire business model canvas. It's not the first one you work on, it's the second, but it's probably the most important thing. So it's what creates value by solving a problem for a customer segment. Sounds pretty basic, but what does that really mean? So what it means is solving a problem, and a problem is a pain for someone that's trying to do a job. Okay, so what is a job? Jobs are things that customers are trying to do, or problems they're trying to solve, and needs they want to satisfy. So a job can be really pretty much anything. A job can be something in a company that a company needs to accomplish. A job that can be something that someone individually wants to accomplish. If I am joining a dating app, my job is I want to go out on dates. The Clayton Christensen has a great example of what a job is for milkshakes. So they noticed, I can't remember, is this McDonald's? I can't remember who it was that initially contracted Clayton Christensen to figure out why they were selling so many milkshakes in the morning. And it was because people needed an easy thing to drink and get quick calories while they're driving to work. And so the job is that milkshakes are hired to make a commute less boring while they drive. That's the job that a milkshake has. Pretty great, right? I like it. Yeah. So you have to think about, what is your customer's job? What are they intended to do? One of the questions that I ask in market validation interviews for many people is, how do you know at the end of a year if you've done a good job? This is often for business people. Like, how are you evaluated? How does your boss know that you've done a good job, right? And those are cues to you. Those are clues to try to figure out what you could help them do. what problems you could solve with them to help them do a better job, whatever that happens to be. So your job is to uncover pain. So pain are these negative experiences, emotions, and risks that people experience in the process of getting the job done. They might be frustrated by something, right? Sometimes the job that they're trying to get done is being done by some other software package that sucks. And so you want to be able to do a better job than that software package. Sometimes they can't get something done quickly, right? And they want to do it faster. And because they can't get it done faster, they're frustrated. Frustration equals pain. So your job in these interviews is try to uncover the pain. And once you uncover pain, if the pain is high enough, well, then you're on the right track and you can potentially solve that pain for them. So here's examples of value. You could help somebody get a job done faster, or you can help somebody get a job done for less money, right? You can get it done, instead of this software package that you use, you can use my software package and we'll charge you half the price and get it done a lot faster. So that's an example of solving pain. Another way of solving pain and creating value is helping someone make more money, right? You could also reduce risk for them in some way, right? Insurance is a great example of that. You can help them you can give them status, right? We can make you look better. At Product Plan, my current company, we realized early on that our software wasn't just about creating product roadmaps so that they could show their executives. It was about creating really beautiful product roadmaps that they could show their executives. Because that monthly meeting that they were in with their executives, when they showed them something really gorgeous, it was a reflection on them and it made them look better. And so it was very important to us as we were developing our software that it had to look spot on. Colors had to be great. The shadows had to be great. We were very particular about making it look good because part of our value proposition was helping our customers look good. You help somebody make a job easier. And those are examples of value. Oh, increasing convenience to someone, right? So it's a whole lot more convenient to call an Uber than it is to hail a taxi in the rain, right? So that's value. All right. So speaking of Uber, for those of you who are in the last session, I talked about Uber, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this one. But essentially, these are the value propositions for if you're a passenger on Uber, you're getting fast, reliable, convenient transportation. You're getting 24/7 access, and so on. Okay, so I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but you get the idea. So now I want you to, for the next, I said 5 minutes, but in lieu of time, spend 2 minutes on this if you can. I want you to fill in the blank here. So you're going to be on your way to creating a value proposition for your customer base. So I want you to think about, we help name your customer segment. This is the customer. Yes, this is the segment that you just came up with. And we help that customer segment do what's the job that they're trying to accomplish. Okay? Or what's the thing that they're trying to solve? By doing what? So a lot of companies, they do the first two parts of this, but they don't do the last part. And they say, we help, people between the ages of 18 to 25 go on dates. Why? And that's where the value comes in. Like, why do you want to do that? So spend a couple of minutes, and I'll walk around if you have questions, and see how far you can get on this value proposition. And yes, yeah, for sure, yeah. So So I'll use a GoToMeeting was an online meeting platform that I worked on. We help business customers conduct meetings online so that they can stay home and watch their kids' soccer game. Okay, so that's an example of value. So this doesn't need to be all-encompassing or the one thing, but I want you to go through and think about what you think your highest value is that you're providing someone. Okay. In the case of
So the by doing is not
it's the why. It's usually you can change this and you can say so that, which is what I often do. So Uber. So we help writers easily get a car so that they can get to their destination faster. Okay, awesome. Thank you all for that. A few best practices along the way for value propositions. Value props are not just features. So think about the benefits that someone gets. And that's the so that part of the statement. It's like you might have some features, but really what are those for? You want to be thinking about your minimum viable product. And I know we've mentioned that term before, the MVP. And this is solving at least one problem really, really well. And you can go to market with the MVP. Your product does not have to have every feature known to man in that product. Ideally, you want to have something in there that creates delight, right? You want to have your purple cow, or you want to have an exciter feature, something that people don't expect. And always be thinking about how you are differentiated. How are you different than the competition? So especially for those markets that you're getting into where there are incumbents in there. So, and these slides will be available.
They're already posted.
Oh, they're already posted. Great. All right, so I'm going to fly fast through revenue streams, and then we can wrap it up. So I mentioned Netflix earlier. The revenue model for Netflix is primarily subscription fees, monthly subscription fees. But they also make money through advertising, small amount, about a little less than 10% on advertising, and then a small amount on content partnerships. So other examples of revenue models. This list, before I brought this here, this had twice as many on here. There are so many models out there that you can use to make money. So a lot of you are familiar with the freemium model, right? So you go on LinkedIn, LinkedIn's free, but if you want the premium feature, which about 10% of customers upgrade to, they're going to charge you $69 a month. Affiliate revenue, right? You click something, you bring it to Amazon or some other website. If you buy the product, they will give you a cut of that. Broker fees, it's kind of like a commission sort of structure. That might be the Airbnb model. It's kind of a commission structure. The razor blade model, which means, it derives from, they'll sell you the really nice razor handle, but the razor blades over time cost a lot of money. Printers do this too. You can buy a printer now for $100, but the cartridges cost you $50 every time you need to load up on them. You can buy per feature, open source, give it away for free, and then charge for professional services to help you implement the software. You can sell data, and then you can have usage fees. So if you're using AWS, that's a great example of usage fees.
We'll be doing a whole thing on revenue streams.
Yeah. Some things about pricing. Make sure that your pricing is not based on what you think it's going to cost you to deliver the product. Pricing, certainly those things need to be in somewhat alignment, but don't start with your costs. Start with the value that you're providing to someone, and then try to understand what the value gives to the customer. So if you, through your product, discover that you can save a few hours per week of someone's time, well, how much is their time worth? How much is their time worth per hour? What's their fully burdened time worth? Like, once you include benefits and vacation time and all of that, start there with your pricing, not with your costs. Don't reinvent the wheel. So look at some other markets out there, other ways of doing it, and deconstruct these other successful business models, and it might help you come up with a model that will work for your business. Consider your acquisition cost. This is a mistake that I've made in the past where I didn't fully consider how much it would cost to bring one customer in the door, and underestimated it, and it kind of blew the model out of the water. So really try to understand how much it costs for you to bring in one customer. A lot of people have the feeling that if they build it, they will come. That never works out. Customers, even if they're free customers, even if they're social media customers, they still cost. Consider the lifetime value of customers. Like, a customer may cost you a lot of money to bring in, but what happens if they stay with you for 10 years? What happens if they stay with you for 10 years and refer 10 other people? Well, that's huge customer lifetime value, and it may make it worth it to pay a lot of money to bring them in the door. Some of you may say, but I don't really sell my product. Well, you still need a revenue model, okay? Even if you're developing a nonprofit, there needs to be some way for the mechanics for it to work out, and that's the revenue model. All right. Do we have a few minutes? I could just fly by the other elements. Okay. So channels, this is how you communicate and sell your product to people. Customer relationships, how you maintain your relationship with people. Is it all online, or is it like a high touch in-person relationship?
Can you go back?
Sure. Yeah.
I think here, customer acquisition part of the business model is important to understand.
Yeah. Yes. And this is where a lot of companies go awry, is in the acquisition. A lot of people don't put time into thinking about how they are going to sell, or they say, oh, we'll just hire a sales team, or social media. Social media is going to be the way that we're going to attract people. And that isn't really a channel. It may be part of a channel, but that isn't the channel itself. And so you need to really think about how customers are going to find you, or how you find them. All right. Key partners. I mentioned Netflix earlier. You need to think about who are your key partners in order to make this thing happen. And am I too reliant on one partner? What happens if that one partner goes away? Is my entire business at risk? Activities are the things you need to do, right? That means hiring people. Maybe it means leasing a manufacturing facility, that sort of thing. Key resources, assets that make your business model work. So you might need to have a lab. Maybe you need to get some patents, that sort of thing. Maybe you need to establish hosting services. And then finally, cost structure. So these are the costs to sustain the business model. So salaries, and make sure as you're doing your modeling, and you'll go into this in later sessions, that probably should include your salary, development costs, and something that's really important on the cost side is which costs are fixed and which are variable. In other words, are there some costs that you pay a certain amount of money for up front and those don't change? That can actually be a really good thing, because as the company grows, those fixed costs become a smaller proportion of the business, and your margins could be higher. So, so it's important to know what the fixed and variable costs are as you go through that exercise. And in the deck, I have another case study that you can look through that talks about GoToMeeting and how GoToMeeting fits into the business model canvas. So that is that. And My name is Jim. Thank you very much.